The following audio-supported podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please speak to a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions. The guests on today's show were paid to participate in this podcast.
What's up, Cheat Codes listeners? It's me, Dr. Z.
And me, Dr. C.
Dr. C, we've got a Cheat Codes alum with us today.
Yeah, excited to have Nirmish back.
He is the best, man, and I've known him in a lot of different capacities over my life in the last decade as first someone that I admired, then a mentor, a friend. I don't think I can say colleague because, he's just that one couple levels up. But Dr. Shah, for those of you who do not know, is associate professor at Duke University, where he takes care primarily of children and adults living with sickle cell disease.
Yeah, he's one of the rare people who train to do both.
Yeah, and it's really cool, right? Because there's this really scary part in sickle cell disease, which is as kids are kind of navigating, becoming adults and learning about their body, their independence, and their disease. That's a really scary journey for them.
Yeah, I mean, we see so many bad outcomes when people sort of fall in the gap between.
Absolutely.
And also it's probably some biological too, like the disease is tougher as you get a little older.
Totally. One of the things I admire about Dr. Shah in particular, though, is that he's kind of been an architect of the bridge between that really scary period. And it's something that I think many people in this community admire about him.
Yeah, I've always known he does transition, but I always think of him as like a technology guru. He always seems to know the newest stuff and is working with Silicon Valley or something. And so I'm excited to hear updates on that today.
Well, with that, should we jump into it?
Let's do it.
Agios is a biopharmaceutical company that's fueled by connections with patient communities, healthcare professionals, partners, and each other. Building on these connections and the company's unmatched leadership in PK activation, Agios is pioneering therapies for rare blood disorders, including PK deficiency, thalassemia, and sickle cell disease. To learn more, visit us at agios.com. That's agios.com. To join the conversation with other patient allies, follow us on Instagram at Ally Voices Rising. That's Ally, A-L-L-Y, Voices Rising.
Dr. Shah, welcome to Cheat Codes.
Thank you for having me here today. I think the welcome is really overstated. I think not only are we, I would say we are definitely colleagues. We're still at the same level because I think we all have the interest in sickle cell disease and appreciate being able to sit on a couch and just talk it out with some friends. It's great. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thanks for being here.
Of course, man. I think there's, one of the challenges in sickle cell disease is there are a lot of things that are measurable, and there's a lot of things that are unmeasurable, especially as it relates to not only morbidity and mortality, but just suffering that patients feel day to day. Before we start diving into that, I'd love to hear your story arc in terms of how did you land on, telling some of these stories or wanting to generate data that helped create, I want to say, a sort of objectifying the suffering.
Yeah, I think it comes down to my medicine pediatrics training was really a lifespan type of training, meaning you're really showing success by helping kids become successful adolescents, become successful young adults, and so on. And so you're continuously reassessing, where are you now? Where do you want to go? And how do I get you there? And so as I did that through MedPeds, and then I kind of fell in love with hematology, and then even more specifically sickle cell, it was just a natural progression to kind of work into that. And I think the really fun part for me is finding out what it is that our patients want. Like, what do they want to do? Where do they want to go? And encourage them, despite a very complicated and very significant disease, to be able to understand that everyone has their goals, and we need to understand what can we measure and understand about you that we can then improve, be it lab values, be it a clinical assessment, be it a patient-reported outcome. What are these measures that then tell me, yeah, maybe I haven't made a difference, and more importantly, have made a difference that patient isn't interested.
That's fascinating. I think that's something that we're very cookie cutter sometimes in our approach. We're very checkboxy, checklisty. So to be able to break out of that and really identify things that are important to patients is it's really neat, really innovative.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be innovative though. Is the thing.
And I think again, I always come back to have a lot of residents and fellows in my clinic, and one big talking point that I have is going back to this holistic approach. It's just this kind of, you're humanizing the patient again. And so you sit down, and one really important thing that I tell my residents is, when you go into that room, I want you to not talk about pain. Talk about everything else, because pain is really tied to sickle cell, almost too much so. It's definitely an important point, number one cause of utilization. The list goes on of why it is a big issue. But we have a patient who's a human and has so many other things that they want to do in life, and not to mention, they have hormones, they have boyfriends and girlfriends, they have work and school that they have to figure out. So I agree. I think that there's not one type of schedule or checkbox that you can go through. I think you have to figure out what is right for that patient. Of course, you follow the guidelines to say, I'm not missing something, but I do think you need to have a very individualized approach.
I think it sounds like such a more optimistic visit too. Like, instead of tell me about your problems, it's like, tell me about what you want to achieve, and then we can figure out what's getting in the way and work on that.
Yeah, I mean, so many of our patients regard us as their primary care doctor. And of course, I absolutely advocate for having a primary care doctor. I don't want to be the one that's managing hypertension, diabetes, or anything else that's not necessarily my expertise. But because they regard you as their primary care doctor, and probably even more importantly, they have a lot of trust in you. You really do need to be optimistic, be forward-thinking, and trying to get them to achieve those goals. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive into a little bit of this idea of patient sort of metrics, right? And measurable things. So there's two ways to look at it. And from a data standpoint, I think you and I have had conversations where you can look at patients over long periods of time. You can look at patients over short periods of time, and you can glean quite a bit of insight in those types of situations. So I'd love to hear first about sort of what is interesting to track in sickle cell patients over a long period of time, and then also what's interesting to track over a short period of time.
Yeah. So you're I feel like you're slightly teasing me to what I'm really interested in, which is really getting as much data about my patient as possible. And that's leveraging technology and wearables and symptom apps, just whatever I can to get information about a patient from day to day, minute to minute, as much information as I can. The interesting part, though, is how do I digest that information? How do I then take it and not be overwhelmed? And so I'll back up and say that our classic measures have been what we've always used, which are laboratory values like hemoglobin and markers of hemolysis. And then we're asking them clinical questions to assess them. A lot of those are validated for questions and PROs in the past 7 days, 14 days, 30 days. So really not made to be assessed day to day, for sure, not hour by hour. But the improvements we have patients hopefully achieve can be that quick. And we want to move as quickly as we can to have improvement. And so that's where it's now been almost 9-10 years now that I've been kind of working in this kind of tech space and not necessarily Silicon Valley, but I would say that there's interest with using technology to try and get passive data. So the data's there. It's just, it's hard for patients to, for sure, when they're feeling great, they want to be outside. When patients are feeling really bad, in pain, for example, and in the hospital, they don't want to do anything either. So expecting them to then, ask or provide answers to questions and be asked questions is really a hard thing to do. And so having them record on an app, historically, in my experience, that's not the best time. But a wearable device, which is passively getting your heart rate and your activity, your steps, your sleep, they're just really common variables that I think will ultimately lead us to better understand how that patient is doing. So to go back to what you asked, like my first inkling of seeing something like that be really meaningful was, let's see here, was 3 years out of fellowship.
Yeah.
So this, I'm not going to give the date because that was a while ago, but it was 3 years out of fellowship. I was had a grant basically giving an app to patients to record how they're feeling every single day. And you could see the pain scores slowly going up. Didn't come to clinic. And so I called the patient because the whole goal was to monitor the patients and see if we can intervene by calling them and texting them. And it was interesting that more I texted them and called them, I was getting to them before they actually had, significant questions. So they wouldn't have reached out had I not reached out. But I was able to then get feedback from them like, oh yeah, it has been cold outside. It has been rainy. I wasn't going to take the ibuprofen because I was worried about it. And like, well, no, this is the strategy. This is your pain plan. And so that was my first thinking, like, this is before the wearables. And I was like, the more information I have, why would I not leverage that to make a decision? So that's really what set me on this journey of trying to get as much data as possible. And I for sure, last thought here would be, for sure would understand, because I have given a lot of conversations to colleagues that have been like, basically said, I don't want all this. I mean, this is too much. How much, I already have the whole EMR to go through, and now you're giving me all this data. My goal is then to now digest it. Like, how can I best give you that information in a meaningful way?
It's fascinating. I mean, it makes sense. It really does.
Yeah, it is so much information, and you can collect it in different ways. And you used a term that comes up a lot in this kind of field of inquiry, validation. And like, as somebody who doesn't work in this, a lot of times I see a questionnaire and asking questions about how you feel, and if they say they don't feel well, it makes sense to me, they don't feel well. But there's so much science behind how to make sure that tool reliably reflects something important. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into vetting these things and sort of developing them as usable tools?
Absolutely. It's a great point. So there, again, I'm on the end of the spectrum of like, give me the information, give me the data. But to be clear, we want it to be valid. We want it to be reflective of a data point that has value and can be reproduced in a meaningful way too across patients. And so to do that, for example, I'll give a very simple example because I've been talking to multiple groups. I'll kind of put a shout out to the Clinical Trials Transformative Initiative, the CTTI, which is academic partners as well as industry partners as well as NIH and FDA. And what
specifically for sickle cell or across diseases?
Well, it's across all types of diseases.
Okay.
And so any disease, chronic disease that is interested in using technology and specifically wearables, how do we take that data and make sure it's validated and make sure that it's meaningful to that disease population? And so they assembled, it's been now many years this has been together, but they've assembled all the studies. Cardiology is doing quite a bit of research studies within wearables. But an easy example of how to make sure something's validated is to take something that has been validated, like a 6-minute walk test, and then correlate that with steps or minutes of activity per day, which actually is a better metric, actually. And so there's a lot of that conversation, which I think needs to be done. And so as we're doing more and more research within sickle cell, we were just having a great conversation about what is most meaningful to patients with sickle cell. And a big part of it is being able to be active and do what they want to do throughout the day, wash the dishes, be able to walk around and get things done. But on top of that, fatigue. And so how do I kind of take some of these metrics and hopefully tie them to some of these standard clinical outcomes that are complicated? And so that's what I think the long answer for validation.
So something like a 6-minute walk test where a patient walks around a track for 6 minutes and you see how far they can walk. And people have done studies and show if you can walk farther, it correlates with living longer or having fewer hospitalizations.
Exactly.
So we know that 6-minute walk test is meaningful. It's associated with health.
Right.
And then you take data like that and combine it or compare it to the data you're getting from wearables like an iWatch
That's exactly right.
or a Ring or a
That's
Fitbit
right.
or something, and try to show this thing I'm seeing on the iWatch. If somebody has a bad 6-minute walk test, it's also bad. And if they have a good 6-minute walk test, it's also good. So we think it's associated with important health considerations.
Exactly right. That's a great summary, because I think the first part is, do I have data in other diseases so I can cross-validate, say, yes, in other diseases we have that. We actually are getting more data within sickle cell now, for sure. And so I think that's a great point. The second part, which I think is even more valuable, is every patient should serve as their own control, right?
Yeah.
So once we know we have a validated measure, every patient has a different metric of where they're starting from.
Yep.
So you're saying, like, we get a bunch of data on somebody, we know how they are baseline, and then if that changes,
Yes,
then
makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of
And so we see them moving in the wrong direction. What interventions do I have to try and improve that? If they're going in the right direction, being encouraging about where we are, and of course, continue to try and do better.
Yeah, I'm sort of, as I'm hearing you guys talk about this, there's something that's sort of coming to me in that, sickle cell disease and its manifestations is a very multi-dimensional disease. And there's a lot of things that interfere with day-to-day activity. It's a very biopsychosocial disease.
Absolutely.
So when you're talking about very objective metrics like minutes of activity in a day, how do you account for what's happening to that patient at a psychosocial level in these very objective biometrics?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and I think that it comes down to looking at trends over time. And so, I think that's another great opportunity to bring up an example where I had that same study where we were tracking patients and the pain was going up, and I called them and they said, yeah, Dr. Shah, I just broke up with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And so the pain was going up, and realistically it was having pain, of course, but the source of that was a stressor,
right,
a very significant stressor. And so I think, again, coming back to what are the causes, I think each patient will have to look at the trends, but those psychosocial stressors, realistically, be it not being able to get to their doctor's appointment because they have to worry about transportation, not having enough money to pay for the bus, whatever it is, those stressors in of itself are causes for bad outcomes in sickle cell disease.
Are you working on tools to measure those things?
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to get as much data. So I'll say this is my pie in the sky. This is what I'm really aiming. I've been working hard to try and get there.
Yeah.
And that is that if I was to build a tool that was similar to the weather prediction app, but for pain. Now, what is weather prediction? It's not always right, but it gives you like an 80% chance it's going to rain. And some weathermen are better than others, so I get that.
Yeah.
There are some algorithms that might do better. But if I could take all the data, like weather prediction is based on, I'm not a weather guy, so a ton of data to try and build that tool, and it improves over time based on what it's learned from itself over the course. And I hope to do that with sickle cell. I'd hope to take a general algorithm of this is what I think over a lot of patients is what usually happens when I see these signals, that your heart rate went up, that you're not sleeping well, you're not moving as much as usual. Just very simple things like that. And then normalize it to yourself. So now, yes, that's the general average, but now I've learned that for you, because I have some patients that when they're actually in pain, they actually walk more at first because they're trying to walk it off. So
interesting.
Trying to push themselves to get through that, to try and, be mobile.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And then they crash.
Yeah.
So there are certain specific signals, and other patients just like completely shut down and say, I just need to rest. So I think there's those individual signals. So that's my pie in the sky. If I could build
super cool
a tool like that, then I think I would be able to account for some of that. I don't necessarily have a tool, because the other aspect I want to bring up is we don't want things to be too much for the patient either. Like, I can't ask them to record every minute.
Of course.
That is obviously too much. But what is the right interval?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to figure out is there are times where we probably need more information, and sometimes we could probably back off.
Man, the way that I envision this going down in my head is like, I know you're at Duke University, but to me you're like Batman. in like a bat cave with all this technology around you. You've got all these devices on the wall. Yeah, he's like trying to figure out, what's going to work.
Batman, and he's Alfred. Like, here's your bat
I think
card.
my kids need to hear this. So this is making me feel much more cool than I am.
It's super cool. Like, I don't know, I'm imagining like a Radio Shack in your office where you're wiring stuff together. But, we've talked a little bit about sort of patients when they're out of the hospital. Talk to me a little bit about, are there opportunities to collect data like this, follow trends like this when patients are in the hospital?
Yeah, I absolutely. And actually, there are studies underway right now where we're giving out wearable devices to patients, and so we're doing them in different settings. So I'll give you an example. The recent cohort of patients that we enrolled were patients that were on with sickle cell disease, were chronic transfusions.
Okay.
With the hypothesis that they do worse just before the transfusion and they do best right after the transfusion.
Makes sense.
So that kind of made sense in my head, but we'll see what the data shows. We just finished a year. So we're excited to see.
Is that local to Duke only?
That was just the Duke part of the study. Since then, we now have an interest in trying to expand and now get multiple cohorts, not just patients on transfusions. And so my goal now for the next cohort of patients that we're going to enroll, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, is patients who have come into the hospital in pain. So they're admitted. And we did this quite a while ago with different wearables, but the nice part here is I want to follow them for 12 months. I want to have them see first how they're doing in the hospital. And I have now vital signs and metrics and nursing notes and a lot of data to kind of correlate with that wearable data. And then I have 30-day post, which is the highest reutilization of care happens in sickle cell disease. 30-40% come right back to the hospital within 30 days. What's happening to those patients during that 30 days? Can I tell who might be the ones that are going to come back? And then now I have a situation where they had pain, they come out of pain, and then maybe go back in pain or not, but now I can have variable data to correlate with the clinical outcome. So yes, absolutely, we should be and are going to be doing that, and that's a multi-institution study. So we have multiple centers. It's led by UPMC.
Okay,
is sponsoring that. And so we're
friends in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, and spin off from the SCD Care, which was looking at patients with chronic diseases within sickle cell disease and randomizing to transfusions or not. And now we're just going to look at wearable data from a cohort of patients all across.
So they put a wearable on while they're in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I sometimes get a flag on my electronic medical record, and it says, this patient is obese and they had surgery and they're not on anticoagulation.
Sure.
Like, put them on anticoagulation. And I've always thought we need that for sickle cell, because I think experienced doctor walks in the room, sees a patient, and you look at them and say, oh, this person's going to have acute chest. They're not having acute chest right now, but it's going to happen soon.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, let's put them on some oxygen. Let's get a chest x-ray. Do what get them up walking a little bit, whatever we need to do. And be ready to do a transfusion if we need to. I think you could pick that up with these kind of metrics and treat patients earlier and faster. Are you looking at things like that?
So I think you're bringing up a good point. So a lot of what we focused on is the patient experience and trying to understand them better through the data that they're giving us. But the other part of it is the other end of the spectrum, which is the provider. Like, the provider has to have the tools and the knowledge and the know-how of what, I don't want to say that the right step is, but what is the appropriate next step to take to try and manage that patient based on the data that you have. And many times, and this is not specific to the emergency room or the community hospitals, but there are many providers, many physicians that don't have that expertise. And so we did this back in the day, but we're trying to get us up and going again, but build a tool for providers that don't have as much experience in sickle cell disease. And we built this sickle cell disease toolbox that we put in the App Store, basically just general guidelines.
That was like a North Carolina thing.
It was a North Carolina thing, yeah. And I remember very vividly as to why we need to keep pushing that, because the day after we rolled it out on a Friday.
And that was like through your state health department.
Yeah. And I'll say that we partnered with our state health department to put the appropriate guidelines in there, meaning what we each vetted as what a provider that doesn't know sickle cell should know, and what are the guidelines for pediatrics and adult, and what are some algorithms if they present with a fever or with respiratory distress, pain, etc. But the build was actually, I have to give a shout out to Jude Jonathan, who's amazing. It's a research coordinator, a sickle cell provider, friend. I mean, just the list goes on. But he made the app. He made the app like out of his garage kind of thing. And basically, we rolled it out on Friday to North Carolina. And we told all the primary care physicians in North Carolina, like, look, here's his app. Use it if you need to. In there were those guidelines and a button to call me if you had needed help.
Awesome.
The first button was FaceTime, which I thought, sure, not a big deal. It became a little overwhelming at some point. But the first call on Saturday morning was a FaceTime. And I remember so vividly because I was walking onto the soccer field to coach my daughter. The game hadn't started, but I was walking on. I got this FaceTime and I'm like, I know this person. It was a colleague of mine, just not too far from us. And I answered, and she's like, Dr. Shah, she's like, your patient's here, and I think she's having a stroke.
Oh.
Tell me more. Like, tell me. And it thankfully ended up having a stroke, but
good.
Just the opportunity of her being able to call me and talk it out.
Huge.
And say, look, and I was also kind of proud because the patient was the one that was pushing.
Wow.
You need to call Dr. Shah. He said something about if I ever had a really bad headache and it was a stroke, I needed this machine next to me. I don't know what this machine does, but she remembered there was a machine. Yeah. So I was proud for multiple levels there. But it does highlight that having information for the provider, a bat phone, coming back to that analogy, having a bat phone where you could just call and say, I need help, or what would you do in the situation would be so meaningful to many providers around the country for sure.
That's remarkable. There's a lot of activity around artificial intelligence currently. Yeah. I'm curious how you're leveraging language learning models, artificial intelligence in your research, in your data generation.
Yeah. I mean, I really appreciate you bringing that because I think AI, machine learning is on the top of mind of any researcher and probably anyone really at this point now with ChatGPT and et cetera. Yeah. But in regards to what you're asking, I think, again, there are a lot of aspects to data that are more complicated, and we just want the computer to figure out the most important aspects of the data. I think what's interesting is that we also need to make sure that we have clinical input to why something is right or wrong. Yeah. Because what's a little bit of the Wild West with machine learning right now is that it's kicking out responses, but it's not understanding the importance. So I'll give you a very good example again, where if you take all this data we talked about, wearable data, clinical data, laboratory data, and you have it try to understand what is a predictor of a patient coming back to the hospital. And it says, oh, these are the top 5 variables, and now we've built a prediction model, and we can predict rehospitalization. That sounds great. I can predict rehospitalization to 80%. Yeah. But if you look at the variables, 2 of them are systolic and diastolic blood pressure, which are tied together. 2 of them are hemolysis markers, which are tied together. Makes sense. So you kind of need to have clinical input to say, well, yes, the computer has found that, but they are tied together. So maybe I need to remove some of this, substitute the next best. So I think there's a back and forth to doing that, but I think it's really a great opportunity to continue to learn without the standard correlation type of data that we often look at. Like, does blood pressure alone correlate well with pain? It does not. But if you look at blood pressure and heart rate and data and continuous variable, meaning variables that are moving over time, as well as being able to see what the trends are, I think is going to be really an interesting opportunity to leverage that. So there'll be a lot more. And the big data coming not just from wearables, I should say this, electronic medical records is just a wealth of information. And I think we're just starting to tap that. We're doing that in other diseases. Say
more about that.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So, I mean, now Epic has over 10 years of data, and we have opportunities, Duke and other centers as well, to have these playgrounds where we can mine the data in a very easy way. I mean, now we just got off a call where we literally, just like ChatGPT, type in a sentence of, I'd like to know, we're not typing code. I'd like to know, for all patients who are developing microalbuminuria, what the time frame was for them to develop this, what were the other comorbidities.
Seriously.
And you just type a sentence or a paragraph, and then you tell it the structure of how you want the data to come to you. So it's not writing SAS code. It's not code anymore. It's doing all that for you. And so it's making it very easy and accessible to investigators and to clinicians to be able to find data across all kinds of patients, and also for one single patient. The days of going through and trying to find 10 years of records and what's been going on with my patient, you just type a sentence, what's been going on with my patient for 10 years, I haven't seen them, and it'll give you a summary.
And this is all in like Epic, the electronic medical record that patient goes to the doctor, you write a note, it goes in there.
Yes.
The labs are all in there. If they get their blood pressure checked, all those numbers are in that computer system.
Yeah.
Can you see all of that for everyone who has a medical record? Or is it just the people at Duke? Or
So good question. So I think right now everything's firewalled to an institution as of right now. I can see a world where that will change and we'll be able to kind of cross that barrier with other institutions. But it's coming. It's definitely coming.
So I picture you have like this bat cave and you have all these like nerds from Duke who are in there making new tools. Yeah. How can patients get involved? And I imagine, as you do these validation tests to see how it's working, you need a lot of people to participate.
Absolutely.
And if I was a patient, I might want to wear one of these and see how my health's doing and what I could work on.
Thank you for bringing attention to this. Again, I really appreciate being able to have patients and other clinicians understand that these are studies that are going on right now. And it's not just at Duke. And the nice thing about these studies, which we haven't really tapped the opportunity here as much as we can, is that these are studies that can be done anywhere. I mean, it's a digital study. So once a patient downloads an app, all the information goes in there. Once they have a wearable, the data goes in through. It all goes to the cloud. It all comes down. It's all HIPAA compliant. It's all secured and encrypted. And so each institution is taking the study on individually, but all of this should be put together, not in a silo, which I'm a big fan of non-silo data. And I think that the first step is just bringing awareness to what digital studies do you have? And we're not alone, for sure. I mean, our efforts are part of this wave of interest. I can think of several others right now that are doing similar type work with mobile apps, wearables, EMR data, as I said. So there's a lot going on.
And Apple and Google and Fitbit.
And you are bringing up an interesting question that often comes up, is there a wearable of interest, for example? And I think everything has their pros and cons, going back to the validation.
And you've tried them all.
I've tried them all. I've tried all.
All on one arm.
Yeah. 2 hours probably. But I would say, the nice thing about Apple is it's so sleek and polished, but a lot of their data is very proprietary, the algorithms they have. And so until you can get the data in a unfiltered fashion, you have to be a little bit careful about what you get. But we actually, and again, shout out to Jude and the team there, have gotten an agreement to get a ton of Apple devices from Apple. Apple has actually bought into this. That tells you there's a signal here of what can be done. But we've seen this with the Philips watch, from Actigraph. I mean, the list goes on with different.
Yeah. Now, listen, we've shouted out Jude a couple times now.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure. We've had Jude on Cheat Codes.
And his son Charles together. It was a great episode.
Dynamic duo right there.
So we've had him, and we'll make sure that we tag that episode in our show notes.
Yes.
Because that's a good episode too.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Dr. Shah, I think one question that stands out to me, and I think you and I have had this very philosophical conversation before, in this idea that there's a really fine needle to thread in trust, compassion, and humanism in the care of patients with sickle cell disease. People who may present to you and may say, I don't feel my best. And now we're in a world where you're tracking data, you're monitoring, and you're not maybe seeing changes in your digital technology, your wearable, your Apple Watch, your Oura Ring. What about those patients that sort of might think that this collection and mining of their data could be weaponized against them as, you're not really in pain.
Sure.
Things aren't going poorly for you. This data speaks differently.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. So I think the clarification of the use of this data is to help you and understand how you are doing. Everyone is different. I say that so many times. Everyone walks their own path. Everyone walks their own journey. And so this information is really valuable for me to understand where your journey is. Because I might have another patient who may or may not have pain, but is doing completely different things than you are. And when you are in that situation, that's your trigger. So yeah. I think having patients understand that as you build that trust, that data is coming back to help them. And I think another important part maybe to bring up here is that what I have found in my experience is that when patients know that you're watching them, even when they're not in front of you, which the majority of our patients are not in front of us at all times.
I bet they feel better.
Yeah, and they feel better that way, but they know that someone's watching.
It's like a safety net.
It's exactly right. It's like a safety net. And so I think if they know and feel comfortable that there is someone watching over them, they feel interested in providing information to that platform, meaning wear the watch, put information about their symptoms into the app, and then make sure that when they come to their visit, like, well, Dr. Shah, you validate that, yes, I've been following, I saw this happen, and I sent you a text to check in on this time. I think those things will go a long way. And so I think, interestingly, I think when we started this, there was a lot of talk about, is this data going to be not necessarily weaponized, but is it going to get lost? Where is it going to go? It goes into the cloud. But now the cloud, everyone's data, I would argue, is probably already there.
Yeah.
And so I think patients feel, good or bad, very comfortable with the fact that their data is being hopefully used in a very meaningful way by their clinician team.
Awesome. Last question. I mean, I feel like we could talk for another few hours, but let's fast forward a decade from now. If you're thinking about your best case scenario with how this has all played out, describe a patient experience, a physician experience in that ideal world.
Yeah, so I take it to that pie in the sky, to just the next level, which is that the limitation we have right now is that we're taking these tools to just acquire data. And then we're trying to make it digestible, manageable, so that the provider can act on it. But why do I have to have this back and forth interplay? If, again, be it AI, machine learning, whatever the algorithm, the tools are, to surround that patient with the answers from the get-go. So the app can already say, I can tell that you have an 80% chance for going into a pain crisis in the next 12, 24 hours. That patient's going to arm themselves differently. They're going to basically understand that they're at risk and act differently. And on the flip side, if a provider was able to take the information that was given to them and, again, have it kicked out to them in a very meaningful way, like, it looks like your patient is at high risk for developing acute chest, we need to make sure they're put on antibiotics, make sure the incentive spirometry is put in place, and it gives you direction, then you almost have an opportunity to take some of the gaps in knowledge and the unmet need of not having enough specialists, not having enough interest in sickle cell disease out of the picture, because now you've given the tools to anyone who's willing to take it on, and it makes it an easier opportunity. The pause I have is we need to continue to make sure we understand this is a patient and not just a number. And so I think us being in the world and advocating for our patients as humans and as patients who have individual journeys is going to be really important, despite us making all the progress we have with all this technology. So I always want to be cautious about, I'm not to the extreme that AI is going to take over and we're going to have something worrisome happen. But I do think we need to be really mindful of how we integrate that into our care.
It's a beautiful thought. And I think this community is just tremendously grateful for all that you do. You as a sickle cell provider, your center is admired as an example of what good looks like. So once again, thank you for being on Cheat Codes.
No, thank you guys. You guys are doing amazing work by highlighting all these different efforts that people are trying to work on within sickle cell disease. And so thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate being able to just chat it out with you.
And this stuff changes so fast. We'll have to have you back on soon to give us an update about...
That's a great point. It changes so fast
Yeah.
that if there's people out there that are wanting to keep up with what Dr. Nirmish Shah is working on, what's new and exciting, how do they do that?
Yeah.
How do they know what you're kind of...
Yeah, I would do
Cooking.
two things. One, you can go to my website, nirmishshah.com.
Awesome.
You
Love
can
that.
go to Nirmish Shah. You can email me anytime too through the website.
Awesome.
I'm an open book to opportunities. I love having, you talked about having really smart kids. I call them kids, but they're like amazing students at NC State, Duke, UNC. They're all just clamoring to work on these type of projects. And so I would say bring your attention to any physician that's interested in sickle cell and working on this. We can bring this technology.
Hey, as someone that has definitely benefited by reaching out to you and developing that type of relationship, I can vouch for the fact that Dr. Shah will answer your emails, and he will definitely help you out if you're looking for direction. Once again, Dr. Shah, thank you for being on Cheat Codes.
Thank you.
Dr. Callahan, I remain unrelentingly impressed with Dr. Nirmish Shah.
Yeah, there's so many things going on, and he's got a hand in all of these technologies and really advancing the field. So great to hear that update, and always good to see Dr. Shah.
Yeah, man, we're lucky to have him in this community and in this space. With that being said, Dr. C, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to interview him with you.
Likewise.
With that, Cheat Codes listeners, if you think that there's someone who could benefit from hearing this episode, feel free to share. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. You can follow me at Dr. Z Sickle Cell.
And me at Imagineer.
Keep living well with sickle cell. Peace.